Hey, folks, welcome to Lead Like You Mean It, people. Let me do it right. Welcome to Lead Like You Mean It, people. Today, we've got a guest that I've known for 9 years. I believe it's been 9 years, maybe 8. I don't know. But Andrew is pretty special to me. So let me introduce him. Andrew Daniel is a leadership professional with over 20 years experience in financial management. Throughout his career, Andrew has built high-performing teams by establishing clear expectations, is strengthening accountability, and developing leaders through coaching and mentorship. His experience spans accounting, finance, and information technology, where he's led organizations through operational challenges while fostering trust, collaboration, and long-term organizational resilience. Most importantly, Andrew considers his greatest leadership role to be at home as a husband and father. Andrew, welcome to Lead Like You Mean It, people.
Hey, Carla. It's nice to have lunch with you. We're not eating. It's nice to have a lunchtime conversation with you. So.
Lunchtime conversation. Great. Oh, so before we get started, Andrew, and I told you about my kind of questions, is there anything you'd like to share before we get into our questions?
Yeah, thanks. I have to handle a little business here. So I want to clarify that I'm speaking in my personal capacity. My views, opinions, and experiences are entirely my own and do not represent the Don, the Department of War, or any of my current or former federal employees. I am also not endorsing any businesses with my appearance. Thanks for giving me a little space there.
Absolutely, no problem. Okay, so I'm not going to start off with the questions. Andrew, let's briefly talk about how we met.
Okay.
All right, so I interviewed you for a position. And I remember thinking, oh, this guy's got his act together. Because as I sat across from you, I noticed you had this little sheet of paper. And it had, I guess, the highlights, and was to help you to refer, to help you when you were responding to the questions. And I mentally got out of the questions the interview, and I remember just watching you. And I thought, this is interesting. And then towards the end, I can't remember what question we asked, but like I mentioned it earlier, but whatever question that was asked of you, you actually went personal. And you mentioned a doctor because one of your children had been in the hospital. Can you share with us what you learned from this doctor in regards to leadership?
Oh yeah, so that's a interesting thing. So my youngest had some pretty acute medical issues. He was actually born at the Children's Hospital, and I had a conversation. I think things went. And I'll say up front, he's doing great now. I'm really proud of him, but. I had a ton of appointments, and we had an appointment it was Dr. Crow at Akron Children's, who's an amazing surgeon in person. And, it was a tough conversation. And I just took a step back and I was like, man, how do you do this? Like sometimes with difficult conversations, I waffle, like it's hard for me to really be succinct and frank and honest. And so he said, well, you just say the facts and the truth, right? And then you give them space to process that, and you don't interject, opinions or feelings. You just stick with the facts and give them space. And I really learned to apply that in my job. Maybe I had expectations of how people were going to react, both positively and negatively. Just because you give somebody an award and they just kind of half smile, that doesn't mean they didn't appreciate the award. Maybe they don't it's difficult for them to accept public recognition. It has nothing to do with you, right? So, and also be compassionate and ask people how sometimes, especially with awards, how they would like it handled, and it wasn't a negative thing with me. That's when I noticed it. Like sometimes I'd be like, man, I took the time to write somebody up, advocate for them. And then they're just like, oh, thanks, so that was really a learning experience for me. And he really helped guide me through some of those tough tough
Mm,
decisions and compassionate with my wife, Emily.
mm. That's pretty cool. I would say, Andrew, that was one of the main reasons why you got the job.
Well, I appreciate, yeah,
Because you
that's
need to see the other side of person.
right.
You need to see the whole person. So tell me about a situation where you've actually seen that and you've actually had to, um, I would say, handle yourself in a professional manner when someone shared a personal item with you, someone who was particularly on your staff or maybe even a peer.
Yeah, I think just in general, you have to, if you're going to be in management, in leadership, you need to learn how to be a good listener, right?
Yeah.
And so reading books, How to Know a Person is a book that I read that was really key on listening. um, and so I guess I'm slow to share specifics because I keep things private. But I think just in general, I try to emulate what I learned from Dr. Crow, and then honestly, in every now quarterly evaluation that I do, one of the last questions I ask is, "How are you doing? Is everything okay?" And I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean with work, right? And that just opens the door for people to feel like they have the ability to talk to you about what's going on. And I think I had an executive pretty early in my management career who was repeating the advice somebody gave to him, and he said, you know you're not in the you business anymore, you're in the people business anymore,
Yes.
right? And you're not in the accounting business anymore, you're in the accounting and people business. So
Mm-hmm.
if you want to run teams, you have to know, I mean, everybody has stuff that happens, both good and bad, and so you have to account for that, as you're giving a quarterly evaluation,
Mm-hmm.
or distributing workload, or that type of stuff, right?
Yeah. Because just like you bring yourself to work. So something wonderful could have happened to you, just maybe an hour before you arrived, and you're on this high, and everyone else is churning at work. But at the same time, it could have been the opposite. Something terrible could have happened to you. So
Right.
we bring ourselves to work.
Right. And just step out of your own world and get a different
Hmm.
perspective, and try to take the perspective of, your peers and your colleagues. And from the micro level of, man, I was able to get a half hour at lunch today, sneak down the gym, got a great workout in, to the macro level, people are dealing with family losses or
Hmm.
difficult situations, and they may not be themselves. And that's
Yeah.
got nothing to do with you. You just need to be compassionate to that.
Hmm.
So,
Yes, absolutely. Okay, we're going to get to Connie's questions here.
okay.
All right. After more than 2 decades leading teams, what have you learned about the role trust plays in successful leadership?
Yeah. So the first way that I learned about trust was admittedly self-serving, right? There's a book, trying to, it's like Less is More Leadership. I believe Burke is the author, and it's about tips to lead and have a life too. Because I was working a lot. I was trying to do everything,
Yeah.
and it was basically, I liked it because I have an accounting and IT degree, very empirical, right? And it broke it down. It's like, the typical young first line supervisor, young in leadership, I mean, not age, but the typical, young in leadership years person has 5 or 6 people, right?
Hmm.
So if you have 5 people and they can do what you could do, at 80%, right? But you try to do everything, you're doing 500 widgets, right? And if you let them do their 80%, right, you may only get 400 widgets, but you can teach them what they can learn from you, and you can learn from them. And in the long run, you'll get more widgets, right?
Hmm.
Because a lot of times, in the SME, right? The technical expert is the one who gets promoted first, right? And that stalls And he also talked about how much that stalls a lot of leadership people. And over after 20 years, I see it's true. And I almost fell into that trap, right? Of stalling a leader's progression because they wanted to be the technical expert and they're never going to get past 500 widgets, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. I've seen that throughout my career as well, and I would say that's in private and public. And it's amazing how the person who really knows the job, the subject matter expert, they are promoted to the leadership position, but they may have zero leadership. So they
yeah,
get in there and they're all about, let's make sure we get, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's make sure we get everything on the list completed. And they never consider, well, what about the person who you're tasking this to? So that was a huge learning lesson for me because I thought, it's all about the work. It should be
yeah,
about the work. That's the reason why I'm
yeah,
here. And then I
yeah,
had to shift it and learn over time. You know what? It's about the people. If you don't have the people to complete the work, you have nothing. You're supposed to take care of 5 positions yourself. No,
yeah.
you're not. That's a
And
hard lesson.
and one or two things happens in that situation. So one, it's an amazing time to learn that skill, right?
Mhm.
Because you do know something about the work. So one or two things happens. Either they get stalled because usually they're competing against quite a few peers and one of them figures out how to do 600 widgets, right?
Mhm.
Or they get promoted. And what happens when you get promoted is no matter what, you're probably not going to know all the work, right? And then they're behind at that second level because they don't know how to trust people to get the work done. You always ask great questions. I told you that before. How to ask the right question instead of being the knowledge manager, right? The
Mhm.
SME.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. But on my end, I had to learn to ask the questions, the open-ended question. That's another thing I wish someone had said to me years into my new leadership roles, is that you need to start asking questions instead of just assuming or just asking closed-ended questions. And then all they're going to do is say, well, no, and I'm not mentally prepared to be curious and ask more questions. I'm just accepting the no and walking away thinking, all right, this employee has no idea what's going on. But the problem fell with me. Really.
Carla, I steal it all the time. You always used to ask, "What am I missing?" Right? I probably once a week I ask that question. What am I missing? Because your time is divided between a lot of different,
Mhm.
usually initiatives, right? And it's so easy to miss something
Yeah.
uh, that an employee wants to tell you
Yeah.
or is going on with the project. The speed of these meetings, you have a half
Mhm.
hour, you're trying to meet the half hour. I I definitely took that from you, which is what am I missing, right? And they'll tell
Mhm.
you, they'll,
Yeah.
yeah. You think you won't get an answer that you'll get an answer to that one, whether you like it or not. You may not
Uh,
like the answer, but you'll get it. So
Andrew, oh my gosh. So 2 things on that. So I even tell ChatGPT or Claude, what am I missing?
yeah,
If
yeah,
I'm designing something. But at one point, I said, I don't need to ask anymore. What am I missing? Because I needed to sit there. This is what I learned. I had to sit there for the next 15 to 20 minutes to listen. Oh, I'm going to tell you what you're missing. And I'm going to go down this long list of things, Carla, and I'm going to explain to you and I'm going to get deep into it so that
yeah,
you'll understand thoroughly what you're missing. And I'm thinking, okay, so this employee knows far more than I do. I have no idea what they said after the first 2 minutes, but
yeah,
it's a powerful question because
yeah,
they will tell you.
yeah, for
Hmm.
sure. Yeah, just brace yourself, right? Because you may not like the answer. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But it also empowers them.
right. Yeah,
It empowers them, which is pretty fantastic. But I think with that question, I learned that really when you walk into leadership, you're going to have to give up your ego. But that
uh,
question made me even more so. You need to sit there and listen. And I'm thinking, okay, they're beating me up, but I asked for it, and it's to help. It's to help us to move forward.
right.
Hmm, interesting. All right, here we go. Another kind of question here. Many people think accountability means punishment or micromanagement. How do you define healthy accountability?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that as an accountant, right? I think as a
Okay.
CPA, I can speak to what accountability is. And to me, accountability is just a presentation of the facts at a certain time period, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that's all financial statements are, is they're a presentation of how your income, how your expenses are, how your assets and liabilities are at a certain period of time. And you can have footnotes that explain those, right? And so, to me, accountability from a leadership perspective is just an accurate representation of the facts at a time. And 90, I mean, I'm making up numbers here, but predominantly amount of the time, that's a positive thing, right?
Mhm.
If you're a business and you have a lot of income and not a lot of expenses, yeah, that's accountability, and you're making a lot of money,
Yeah.
right? And if your employees, um, are doing really well on a project and they tell you, here's what's going on, we're ahead of schedule, right? Try to quantify it. And you go talk to leadership, you say, hey man, my team, they're rocking and rolling, right?
Mhm.
We're ahead of it.
Mhm.
On the other side of it is I also consider it a bonus because you get early intervention to problems, either a problem with a project, a problem with performance of an individual or of a team, or a problem with conduct of
Mhm.
individual or how the team is interacting with each other, right? And it allows you to say, hey, we're just going to talk about what's going on right now, where we're at, right, and how to move forward, right? And that could be usually it's really positive because you get to represent and advocate for your team. If it's not going well, you also get to represent and advocate for your team if things aren't going as well, right? And the I think the worst thing you could do. This is what you say. What somebody would have said uh, to me as a young leader. I think trying to control the narrative is exhausting, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it allows you to um, just be build trust with your management and your team because I'm just looking at the facts, right?
Mhm.
And if you go to your leadership and say, here's where we're at with the project, we're behind schedule, you don't have like a solution lined up, that's the worst thing you can do. Or if you go, everything's great and you're behind, also not acceptable, right?
Mhm.
But if
Mhm.
you go, hey, everything's going great, or we're behind, and here's some options to fix it. Here's what I know. Do you know anything else that I don't know? Which one of these courses of actions do you have questions on? If you want an opinion, I have one about what our way forward, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Since we went through this together, talk to me about how you can improve a transition when it includes the, I would say the, like a better term, the higher, the organization above you, organizations that are, relatively on the same level as your organization, and then some of the sub organizations. How do you handle a project that's transitioning when you have to speak to so many different levels from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, and that goes back to the narrative thing, right?
Mhm.
Number one, you just have to be to be honest in your assessment, right?
Mhm.
And you don't need note cards for presentations if you're giving an honest assessment, right?
Absolutely.
And so it takes the burden off of trying to control a narrative. That doesn't mean that you present the information the same at every level because you're going to deal with people at a higher echelon that need
Yeah.
summarized succinct. You have 5 minutes to talk to me, and then I
Mhm.
got to go somewhere else, right? And then
Mhm.
you have a team that may need more detail. So that's just like be brutally transparent, right? And then you also are transparent, and it's like death to the ego. People like to think they have a lot of influence. You probably have less than you think you have, and so you have to be brutally honest about how much influence it is, right? And it's like, when you're talking to the employees, yeah, this is this is direction, right? There's a conversation, there's a time to talk about what direction we're going to go.
Mhm.
That happened. I took you guys' comments. We talked to leadership. A decision was made. I understand you may not agree with it. but the decision has been made and the time to have the conversation is over. We need to move out. And back to the Dr. Crow thing, that's when you got to step back. Don't take it personally. They're going to reiterate their opinion usually, and then you have to listen to it, give them space to process what you're talking about. And this is the other thing I learned too. I have to make sure I processed it before I go talk to my staff, because I don't want to process it in front of them. Right.
Yes, absolutely. Because I've been in that situation where it's from one meeting to the next, and you've heard, or at least for me, I've heard the direction. Yeah. And let's say the meeting was at 1:00, 1 to 1:30. Hey, this is the direction we're going. And, I sat there and I was like, oh, this is major. This is not just, hey, let's flip the page and let's do something, one particular task. It was major. And then my next meeting, I had to meet with my staff. And to have that clear mind is so important. But it also, it takes time to be able to shift to say, you know what? I need to align with my leadership, because after all, I work for my leadership. I may not always agree, but I need to be able to align with them, and then I need to convey it to the staff. So tell me a time, of course you can't explain, tell me a time when you did not agree with leadership, but yet you had to follow their lead.
Yeah, I can't speak of specifics, but just to pivot, in general, it's not about agreeing or disagreeing. I think it's an understanding of your position in an organization, and understanding that too, you have to let your ego die, and that your leadership has more information than you have, right? Absolutely. And so it really, to me, it ends agree, disagree, right? And it's more, they have their reason for making that decision, right? And it's my job to, execute on that decision and advocate for my people as best I can as we go through that transition, right? And I think if you're honest in your assessment, usually they'll ask, they'll consider your opinion. And as somebody working for somebody, that's really all you can ask is to make sure they take your opinion into consideration, right? So I don't really, I guess I deal more in the gray versus binary, agree, disagree. It's kind of like, I spoke my piece, let's move out, right?
Yeah, so, I've had an instance where I've disagreed. But at the bottom at the bottom of the hour, if it's not taken, because they have the direction, which I totally I understand. This was another learning session that I had to go through. You can disagree in private, because I had no problem. I felt free to disagree in private. But at the end of the day, if no laws, regulations, or policies were going against, then Carla, you're going to do it, right? Absolutely. But I needed that space, and I appreciate the different leaders who've given me the opportunity to sit there in private and say, I don't agree with this. This makes no sense. This is foolish. How are we going to be able to share this and direct the staff with this? How are we going to share with other organizations? And they have allowed me, the majority of my leaders in the past, they have allowed me to sit there in private and disagree. It also helped emotionally to get it out as well. But again, at the end of the hour, when the meeting is over, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, and you move forward. So
right, and you have to do that because you're also representing your team, right?
Absolutely,
and they need to move forward. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to flip the script, Carla.
Okay.
When you were in that situation before, from one meeting to the next meeting to the next meeting, here's what I've seen across multiple. Do you feel the need to share that information immediately and be sort of, because you know how agencies work, the rumor mill starts flowing, right?
Yeah.
Or do you think it's okay to wait 3 hours, half a day to allow yourself to process, before you talk to your staff about it? I've gotten different opinions on this.
Okay. So to me, it depends. It depends on, I would say, is this Is this earth shattering? Is this something, if you work for the federal government, is it the congressional level? Is it at your level? And then when I work for the private industry, is it at the presidential level? You know, you have a president sometimes, or you have the CEO, so forth. It is at their level, or is it something simply at our level that there's a structural change, or if there's just let's say a policy change that will affect us. If it's something that's strictly at my level, I can give them a heads up, say, hey, this is what's going to happen. We're going to talk a little bit more when we have our staff meeting. So I'm just going to give you a heads up, and I appreciate if you're not asking any questions. But I don't want to keep you all in the dark, but we'll talk more at our meeting. If it's at a higher level, then I need to wait. I mean, if something's going to happen tomorrow, that's different. But I need to wait because I need to gather my thoughts. The same thing I told you, I was emotional with, I don't agree with this.
Yeah.
But I am going to fall in line because I work for someone else. So I need to gather myself together. It all depends, again, on the level.
Right. Thank you. I needed that.
Hey, Andrew. Wait a minute. How did we get flipped the script? Thank you for that. That was good for me. So I want to ask you a question. Talk to me, because you did say your favorite leadership happens to be within your household with your wife and with your two sons. Talk to me about leadership as it pertains to them.
Yeah, so on the personal level, like I grew up, I'm in my 40s now, so I'm fine talking about it, right? I grew up in a single parent household, and with work and stuff, I didn't have a male, figure around, right? So I go into fatherhood, I'm like, I don't know, like I don't have great examples. I mean, I have some family members who stepped in here and there, and I'm forever appreciative of that. But the everyday solid stuff, right?
Yeah.
And some advice, in those situations, I look for outside advice. And some of the advice I got was, look, the best advice I got is, look, you don't have to be perfect. They know you're not perfect, right? But what you have to be is present, right? Mm-hmm. That is 99% of it. Be there. And then be humble and that I really found transcends to everything. Look, as leaders, you got to give yourself grace. You're going to have bad days, right? You're going to make 100 decisions a month, and if 98% of them are correct and good, you still have 2 bad decisions, right? Mm-hmm. And you're going to have to accept that. But your team is going to know. Right? Your team is going to know if you're present, and your leadership will know if you're present, you're engaged, and you're attempting to do the right thing. Right? Mm-hmm. And the second thing is, I'm actually going to talk about AI a little bit because, I had an early interest in this. It's kind of blown up. But what I've noticed with some younger leaders is you talk about your voice, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you a story. Is my kid was talk about writing a email to his teacher. I forget what the topic is. And he wanted some help. And, I just opened up the AI that I use. I typed it in, I got a response, and I emailed it to him, as an example. And he knew right away, you didn't write this. This isn't you, And so what I've learned is you want to have an authentic voice, right? Because that's what they're going to hear. As I got a 15-year-old, right? We're talking about driving, the stomach churns just thinking about it. You want them to hear your voice in their head when they're about to make a wrong decision, right? Mm-hmm. So establishing that voice at home is very important. And I mean, I messed up last week, right? I mean, I talked about the situation, but I made a bad decision as far as my kid. I mean, nothing horrible, but it's like, I could have handled that better, Yeah. And so I talked to my kid about it, and he got an authentic voice, right? And I think, I probably struggled with that earlier in my career where I said what I thought was the right thing to say instead of establishing my voice. And it was very clear to me when I talked to my son, it's like, about that email, it's like, oh, they know. They know if you're being, even at 12, right? They know if you're being authentic with them
Mm.
and they know if it's your voice, right? So I think that I've thought about that too a lot. Um, so, don't not have the tough conversation because it may not be the perfect conversation, right?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
have to have that rough draft of the paper. You have to work through things to establish your voice both at home and then I've transitioned to work. So I think about this constantly. You got me going on this one because I think about it constantly. And the other thing is just a holistic approach, right? I mean, quantitatively, you have 24 hours, you sleep 8 hours, you have 10 hours of really good concentration a day. You have to have the difficult conversations, at home and say I need to concentrate on work,
Mhm.
and at work, concentrate on home, and you'll learn a lot through that process. And I tell you, one of the reasons that I took the job, you talk about why I got the job offer. One of the reasons I took the job is because I told you I want to coach basketball, rec league basketball for my kids. And
Mm.
it's on this night, right? And I needed 2 nights a week for 12 weeks or something, right? And
Mhm.
he
Mhm.
said, okay, we'll work with it, right?
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, like this is going to be a mutually beneficial situation. And I
Mhm.
used that to recruit people because I said, hey,
Oh.
you know, hey, I already had a conversation with her. She's on board with, you know, how you want to live your life. And I was, able to get super high performers to think about, a different position because of that. So,
Mhm. Mm.
yeah.
I mean, that's fantastic. So let me backtrack a little bit. Did you say your son said this is not your voice?
Yeah, he called me out. He said, "You use AI to
That's
write this. This is not you." He knew automatically.
wow.
This is not you, right?
Okay.
So, from a technical perspective, I learned that I need to write the rough draft, and then I need to have check my grammar, check my spelling, check my tone. Is
Mhm.
this appropriate, right?
Mhm.
Versus, hey, I need an email to a teacher about you know, a homework assignment that I forgot to turn in or something, right?
Mhm.
So on the technical perspective, it's how you interact with the AI. But on a personal perspective, it's as we get more and more into these assistive technologies, is don't lose your voice
Mhm.
because that's something that you own, and that builds trust within people when they know somebody's being authentic with them.
Okay, but what's fantastic is that your son knows your voice. So when you mention someone shared with you about being a father is just, be present. Your
Yeah.
son knew you well enough and feel comfortable, to say, "Hey, Dad, this is not your voice." That's pretty fantastic.
He wasn't just comfortable; he relished it because I told him, "Don't use AI." Oh, he loved it. So that's so disrespectful. I can't believe you would do that. He gave it to me and he loved it. I'm like, well, I guess you gotta death to ego. Like if you dish it out, you got to be able to take it, right? So yeah, that was a
Hey, your son
moment.
knows you well. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
There's your presence with your son. That's pretty cool. So tell me, other than um, about your voice, what is one thing? Because right now we've got about 1 minute or so left. What is one thing you want to leave with? Let's say emerging leaders.
The AI thing is why. Let me think about that for a second. Yeah. I'm just gonna foot stomp. If you're just coming up, establish your voice. Be authentic. There's a lot of it's different now to have boys. It's I don't think social media is healthy. I think that's starting to and if you use the tool appropriately, it's good, right? But
Mhm.
I think that, you don't need to be an influencer at work, right? You don't need to be a celebrity at work. And you certainly don't need to be inflammatory or like make everything seem like a big deal, right? In fact, quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. It's you need to be steady, calm, composed, and be able to deal with problems in a professional manner, right? And I think for emerging people, it's be authentic, use the tools appropriately, right? But be comfortable with your voice. And the other thing is get don't be afraid to invest in yourself, right? And so, um, I had a 360 review one time, and one thing that somebody told me was don't look past. I was like a 13, and I'd been first line, second line, or staff, first line, second line, 13. I was ready for that next job, right? And it's don't look past your current job, and that was amazing advice for me. Um, and it really helped me. But that came from it was something that my employer graciously invested in us, right? But don't be afraid to invest in yourself, and be open to what you learn about your communication style. That's not losing your voice. That's just learning how to appropriately communicate and be authentic, right? That's a skill. It's not something that is innately born, right? So very few people have it, but mostly you have to learn that skill to be authentic, appropriate, calm, and compassionate.
All right. All right, Mr. Daniel, thank you so much. Hey, I'll let you get back because you said you were on your lunch hour. But thank you so very much. And folks, we will see you in a couple of weeks for the second week of August on a Wednesday, and then the fourth Wednesday. I always get them kind of mixed up. That's sad. We've been in this for a year now. But the second week of August, and then the fourth week of August, we'll see you with Lead Like You Mean It People. 2 additional segments here. Thank you again, Andrew. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Carlos. Good seeing you again.
It's been a pleasure. All right, folks, we're out of here. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.